I'm going to walk through some basic laser case designs, making 3D objects out of sheets of wood or acrylic, what be it. The first thing here, this is one of my old designs. This is my first attempt at making a light box. It came out okay. So it had an incident with a belt sander. This is what's called a finger joint. It's classic woodworking technique. This one is just done with a laser instead, instead of a router where you would come in, or a bandsaw or any kind of saw. You'd come in with the laser. You can get perfect corners. It's a lot easier to do, and it's repeatable because it's a CNC machine. This is something that I kind of haven't really seen anywhere else, because what I did was I took a 1/4-inch piece of wood and used a 1/8 inch, half the thickness of acrylic and wood to make the front. So it's sandwiched in there, so you get this little bezel that goes around it. One of the side effects is you get light that comes out the corners. This design has quite a few many problems. I didn't have any connectors, so I used these 0.1 inch, essentially like Arduino. They're just pinhead. These are B-male pin headers, and I just have male in here. There's 3 sets of 12-volt LED RGB strips in here. They are not. This is also basic light diffusing. It's like at 9 volts. You can see if it's showing up to the camera, but the center strip is more purple than the outer ones are blue. But of course they're RGB, so I don't have any way to vary the intensities. There. You can see that the light comes through on the corners of this guy. Right there. This is just cheap plywood. This is actually frosted acrylic, and then behind it is a thin sheet of wool or the fake felt. So this is one of my first designs. It came out okay. It's just glued, just a flying spaghetti monster and some text on here. Came out okay. Later on, I eventually put in, made a few. I made a Triforce one that came out pretty good. So I stopped using the frosted acrylic because it just doesn't diffuse enough. I think I made this. I may have bought this. This is 1/8 inch acrylic. You can easily frost it. You can use some chemicals. I typically use the sandblaster. It can be a little tricky to get even, but for something like this, it's pretty easy, fairly consistent. What I eventually went to is translucent white, which is a very heavily diffused white acrylic. And then I etched it, and then what I do is I put tape over, masking tape over it before you etch. And then you etch into it, and then afterwards you clean it off. It's best to use some water, some light water, and an air gun, and because you'll be left with powder in all these guys. You clean it off completely. You take it over, and then you spray paint it. Black usually works best. It depends on what color you want. You can use a different color spray paint, and then you'll get this. This is what I did with here, but this was already, I believe this is pre-frosted. And then behind it is a thin sheet of wool. I thought it would diffuse it better. It did not, but it works okay. My first design. And this is another little thing I made a while back. Pretty simple. This was actually made for an arcade game. You have your 5-volt rail, your -5, and your 12-volt rail. Same style. This is also a box joint. This one has not been sanded really, and this one hasn't been stained or anything. This is a very light oil stain onto it, which then you can see how aggressively it was sanded. This is pretty cool. This is just laser cut holes with self-tapping screws, and you can put these brackets, you can put them 90 to 180 to where it is right now. And this is just designed to mount on the back wall of an arcade game. It just like, you just do a quick glance inside, you can see all your voltages and make sure everything's good if you're trying to troubleshoot. Just something fun I made. Useful for myself. I put it inside the arcade game that I restored. These are really cool. These are actually self-powered voltmeters. Not the most accurate things in the world, but really cool, really neat. I bought a big box of these off eBay for like $20 for a bunch of them. Ended up being like $1 a piece. And then these are actually M2.5 hardware. Pretty cool. This is a different version of the exact same thing. This is crap, I forget what these are called. This is a different style box joint. Instead of gluing, you use screws, and the nuts are captured in the plywood. When you tighten it, holds it in place. You're not going to be able to get this crazy tight, but this is an easy way because these are both glued. You know, to get these apart, you essentially destroy it. So this is a cool way of being able to remove it, and it also adds some look to it. I ended up canning this and not making any of these, but you can see the power supplies. They're quite cool. Essentially just two chips on it. This is a little bit of adjuster pot, so you can adjust the voltages on this. I'll show you how these things work. Quite simply, this thing's falling apart. This thing's been banging around in a box for the past moving it across, I don't know, 10 states. Might be able to get all these on. Just power up the one for right now. I think this is it's reading about 10.5 volts. So let's see. There you go. 10.4. My bench power supply says 10.5. Yeah, so it's roughly 10.5, 10.4. Actually, kind of curious now what the other ones are reading. See if I can grab these both. 10.5. See, so it might be around the threshold. I can. There, so it might be right on the threshold of the voltage. Again, not extremely accurate, but very fun. Just some cool little things. Well, you can see the whole pattern here. And finally, we have this guy. This is I actually bought this nixie tube clock. I kept on making excuses for not building my own. This is walnut, and the front I believe is zebra wood. And this is a feed and wax beeswax. It's not oil, but it's a wax and stain. You just rub it into the wood, and it protects it. This is just finger joint, laser cut, pretty basic. And then I just designed the pattern for the front. And this one is actually glued, but the back is not glued on. Just held in place by friction. And you can see the clock in there. It just slips in, and then two screws on the front. They go to standoffs, and then there's a hole in the back to adjust, and that adjusts the current going to the nixie tube, so you can increase the brightness or decrease the brightness. It's a little bit warm. It's nowhere near hot. You know, it's just slightly warm to the touch. It's not getting super hot. There is high voltage in here. You know, don't want to be poking around. You get zapped when it's running. I had just naked sitting on my desk for the longest time because these are actually they have isolation washers on the inside, so it doesn't carry voltage to the front. It's very simple. These just poke through, and then the friction of these two switches, and then this guy just kind of holds this back on. And this is just 1/8 inch plywood. Nothing fancy here at all. I obviously didn't want to use fancy wood for the back. You're not going to see it. It just goes on like that, and there it is. This has a battery backed clock chip as well. Shouldn't have lost time. Pretty cool. I got this off a guy off Etsy. Very nicely done. No, it's not tubes. If you can see, I actually made a mistake. This is hardwood that I ordered years ago and forgotten that I actually owned. The front is actually 16th and this is 8th, so I actually had to sand down all of these, but I think it looks pretty cool with it poking up. Makes it look a little more homemade versus being made by a computer. Yeah, those are just some basic laser designs, stuff that I think looks really interesting. I'll put some pictures of some old or some of the later ones. I have to make some more of. I still have the designs, but of the later ones that I moved to with the different light boxes that are much better diffused. You honestly can't even see the individual LEDs. It just looks like it's being illuminated evenly, which is a really cool look. Versus this, where you can see the LEDs. If you like that, that's a cool design. But yeah.